You can feel it the moment you walk into the room. The glance that lingers, the tone that shifts, the quiet pause before they ask, "And what brings you in today?" But what if the person on the other side of the room looked like you, really looked like you? By the end of this episode, you'll understand why representation in healthcare isn't a luxury, it's a form of survival. You'll walk away with a deeper awareness of how identity impacts care, how shared experience builds trust, and how representation can literally change outcomes. Welcome back, warriors. I'm Gwen, and this is Empowerment in Illness. You're listening to our series, The System Isn't Broken. It was built this way, where we pull back the curtain on the systemic issues that shape our health, our care, and our lives. Today, we're talking about something that doesn't always make it into statistics, but shows up in our bodies. Representation in medicine. What happens when your doctor doesn't look like you? When they don't come from your background? When they don't understand the cultural context of your health or the unspoken history of distrust in the system? This conversation is not about blaming individual providers. It's about the deep, collective need to feel safe, seen, and heard in spaces where our lives are on the line. Because when the person taking care of you doesn't reflect your lived experiences, it's not just uncomfortable. It can be life-altering. Let's talk about why representation matters and how we reclaim it. Representation in healthcare isn't just about optics. It's about outcomes. Studies show that when patients are treated by providers of a similar racial or cultural background, communication improves, trust increases, and diagnostic accuracy often goes up. It's not about exclusivity. It's about safety. It's about finally exhaling because you know you don't have to justify your pain or defend your intelligence or decode medical language in a space that wasn't built for you. The absence of representation is its own kind of trauma. When no one in the room looks like you, you begin to wonder if anyone in the system was ever meant to care for someone like you. You show up prepared, rehearsed, braced for disbelief, for assumptions, for coded language that sounds professional but feels personal. People of color, LGBTQ plus folks, disabled patients, and those from immigrant backgrounds often face an additional layer of tension in clinical spaces, cultural dissonance. Things get lost in translation, not just in words, but in values, context, and lived experiences. That's why representation isn't optional. It's essential. Let me ask you, have you ever felt like you had to perform your illness just to be taken seriously? What did that cost you emotionally? What did that delay in care cost you physically? There's a difference between being treated and being understood. One listener told me something that really stuck with me. He said, "I only see black physicians on purpose." Not because he doesn't believe others can help, but because the peace of being in a room where he doesn't have to over-explain himself is priceless. "It's the only time I don't brace for judgment," he told me. "I walk in already understood." He also said that it's a conscious decision to support their practices because they support people like him. It's not just healthcare, he said. It's healing. That's what representation does. It doesn't just shift the tone of the appointment. It shifts the power. It makes the relationship mutual. It makes trust possible. When your doctor shares your background, the conversation changes. They may pick up on subtle cues that others miss. They may understand family dynamics, dietary norms, or culturally specific expressions of pain and emotion. This isn't about creating silos in healthcare. It's about building bridges through lived experiences. I completely understand why someone would want representation they can relate to in a doctor. For me, I've never chosen a provider based on race, but I have absolutely chosen based on gender. When it comes to women's health issues, I've always felt that a woman doctor is the best option for me. There's a sense of unspoken understanding that's hard to explain but deeply felt. I don't feel uncomfortable talking to her about my body. I don't have to over-explain or brace myself for the awkwardness. And even if I can't find the perfect words, she catches the meaning because she gets it. There's a rhythm and trust there that makes the whole experience feel safer. She doesn't just treat my symptoms. She listens to the story behind them. We've built a strong, trusting relationship over time, and I wish I had that with all of my doctors. Because once you experience that kind of care, where you feel seen, heard, and respected, you realize how rare it actually is. You realize how much emotional labor you've been carrying in every appointment just to be understood. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever had a provider who looked like you, talked like you, or just got it without you having to explain everything? How did it feel to be seen in that way? And if you've never had that experience, what would it mean to finally have it? When representation is missing, assumptions take over. One listener shared that her provider told her, "You people tend to be dramatic about pain." Another said she was asked if she understood what lupus was, as if her education was in question simply because of her accent. These aren't outliers. They're patterns, and patterns create trauma. When you don't see yourself reflected in the people caring for you, you start to wonder if the system ever expected you to survive it. Patients of color are less likely to be offered the same treatment options. Trans patients are often misgendered or dismissed entirely. Disabled patients are infantilized or treated as incapable of decision making. The system assumes it knows your story without ever listening to it. Going to the doctor who doesn't see your identity is like giving someone a puzzle, but half the pieces are from another box. They force the wrong pieces to fit, thinking they've solved it. But the picture they're building isn't your reality. It's their assumption. And in that mismatch, your truth gets lost. Think about this. When was the last time someone made an assumption about your health based on how you looked, spoke, or moved? What did they miss because they didn't take the time or have the background to ask the right questions? Where do we go from here? First, we push for equity, not just access. It's not enough to have care. We need care that respects our truth. That means demanding culturally competent providers, supporting diverse medical students, and advocating for inclusive medical education. Because when healthcare only reflects one kind of patient, it only heals one kind of body. Second, we create safety in community. If you can't find representation in the room, find it online. Find it in support groups. Find it in advocacy spaces where lived experience matters. You deserve to feel safe. You deserve care that doesn't require you to prove your humanity first. Third, we share stories like the one you heard earlier because they remind us that we're not crazy, we're not dramatic, and we're not alone. The more we speak these truths, the more undeniable they become, and eventually the system will have to catch up to our voices. Have you ever stopped to think about this? What would change for you if your provider looked like you or deeply understood where you come from? What kind of care would become possible if trust didn't have to be earned every time you walk through the door? For our listeners' action plan, advocating for representation in your care, research provider directories with filters for identity. Use platforms like blackdoctor.org, LGBTQ+ affirming directories, or local cultural orgs to find providers who reflect your background. Ask about cultural competencies up front. Don't be afraid to ask. Do you have experience working with patients who identify as blank? That question alone shifts the tone. Support medical professionals and marginalized groups. Follow, promote, and refer people to providers who represent the communities they serve. Visibility grows through support. Speak up when you witness bias. If you're in a care space and see someone being mistreated or ignored, say something. Silence is complicity. Presence can be protection. Reflect, share, and challenge the norm. Your voice matters. Tell your story. Representation won't change until we demand it, and we won't demand it until we believe we deserve it. Before we leave, I would like to close with a special portion of the show I call Healing Heartbeats. This is where we allow ourselves to wallow in sorrow. Give yourself 3 minutes to laugh, cry, scream, cuss, or just sit in silence. Whatever you need to do to feel it, do it. Let the depression in for only 3 minutes. Once you've reached 3 minutes, compartmentalize it and get back to living. This is a rinse and repeat behavior. You cannot let depression take over, because when it does, it will not let go. When we hear about the passing of someone, they have the day they were born and the day they pass away. There's a dash in the middle. It's not a long line, but a short dash. That dash represents your life. Go live in spite of having a chronic illness. Don't let your condition stop you. Representation isn't just about comfort. It's about survival. When we see ourselves reflected in care, we begin to believe that our health matters, that our stories are valid, and that our pain is real. When we don't, we brace for harm. We armor up, we go quiet, and that silence can be deadly. Every person deserves to walk into a medical space and feel safe. Every patient deserves to be treated with dignity, not doubt. And every community deserves to see their faces, their stories, and their experiences reflected in the people who are trusted to heal them. That's not a wish. That's a requirement for true care. You're not asking for too much when you ask to be seen. You're asking for the bare minimum, and still the system often fails to deliver. But your presence, your story, and your insistence on the truth, that's the beginning of a revolution in healthcare. And every time you demand more, you build a path for someone else to be treated better. You are not a burden. You are a blueprint. And you are not alone. Thank you for joining me as we close episode 3 of the series, The System Isn't Broken. It was built this way. Share this episode with someone who may need to hear this message. We are making our voices heard. Remember, you have the strength, the heart, and the support to continue your journey. Be safe.